Have you ever been in a situation where someone's quiet demeanor turned out to be calm before the storm? Moments when what seemed like an ordinary encounter suddenly revealed something far more profound, something unforgettable. Well, what you're about to hear is exactly that, a story that will challenge everything you think you know about strength, assumptions, and the power of silence. It begins on a seemingly unremarkable evening at a small roadside convenience store. The kind of place where life moves slowly, almost unnoticed. A man pulls in, his car rumbling softly as he parks under the flickering glow of a street lamp. To anyone watching, he appears unremarkable, just another face passing through. But behind the scenes, something darker was lurking, something far more intense than anyone could have anticipated. What unfolds next isn't just a confrontation, it's a lesson etched in courage and composure. It's a reminder that appearances can deceive, and sometimes the most unexpected individuals carry the weight of extraordinary stories within them. Before we move forward, take a moment to let us know where you're tuning in the comments below. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss powerful tales like this one. Because trust me, this is a story you won't want to forget. The evening was unremarkable, almost mundane. The kind of night where the world seems to hum along in quiet monotony, indifferent to the lives playing out under its dimly lit skies. A convenience store stood at the edge of a sleepy highway, its neon sign buzzing faintly against the backdrop of an overcast sky. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt outside. It was the kind of place people passed through without a second thought, a brief stop for fuel, snacks, or maybe just a moment's pause before continuing on their way. On this particular night, a man pulled into the lot. His car was nothing flashy, just a sturdy sedan with a few dents and scratches that spoke of miles traveled and stories untold. He parked near one of the pumps, stepped out, and began the routine task of refueling. At first glance, he seemed ordinary, perhaps even unassuming. His build was stocky, his posture relaxed, and his movements unhurried. There was no sense of urgency, no air of importance about him. Just another traveler stopping by to complete a simple chore before moving on. But there was something beneath the surface, something you couldn't see unless you knew what to look for. This wasn't just any man. This was someone who had spent years honing skills most people only read about. Someone who carried within him the discipline of a Navy SEAL commando, though nothing about him advertised it. No medals, no swagger, no bravado. Just quiet confidence etched into every fiber of his being. Not far away, a group of men loitered near their pickup truck. They were loud, brash, and radiated an energy that felt almost invasive. Their laughter echoed across the parking lot, sharp and grating, punctuated by crude jokes and jeers. These weren't men who blended into the background, they demanded attention, whether it was wanted or not. Their eyes scanned the area until they landed on the solitary figure at the pump. At first, their interest seemed casual, almost dismissive. One of them nudged another, nodding toward the man. "Look at this guy," he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. What a joke. Another chimed in, mocking his size, his demeanor, his very presence. Racial slurs followed, cutting through the stillness of the night like shards of glass. Each word was laced with venom, designed to provoke, to demean, to assert dominance. To them, he was an easy targeter, nameless, faceless stranger they could belittle without consequence. But the man didn't flinch. Not once did he turn his head or acknowledge their taunts. He simply continued what he was doing, methodical and deliberate, as if they weren't even there. This only fueled their arrogance further. To them, his silence wasn't strength, it was weakness. They saw it as permission to push harder, to escalate, to test how far they could go before he broke. Little did they know they were walking straight into a reckoning they would never forget. As the tension simmered, unnoticed by anyone else in the vicinity. The stage was set for something extraordinary. What started as a quiet evening at a nondescript gas station was about to become a moment that would leave witnesses speechless and teach everyone present a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The air grew heavier with each passing moment, charged with an energy that seemed to crackle just beneath the surface. The group of men, emboldened by their own sense of superiority, began to close in. Their laughter grew louder, more biting, as if they were trying to drown out the quiet resolve of the man at the pump. They circled him like predators testing their prey, tossing insults with reckless abandon. Words like daggers, they sliced through the night racial slurs, cruel jabs about his weight, taunts meant to humiliate and provoke. Each insult was a calculated attempt to break him, to force some reaction, any reaction that would justify their aggression. But the man remained unmoved. His hands gripped the fuel nozzle with steady precision, his focus unwavering. He didn't glance their way, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of acknowledgement. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like indifference, but there was something deeper in his stillness, a calm that bordered on unnerving. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hesitation. It was control. Pure, unshakable control. This only infuriated them further. How could someone so ordinary appear so unfazed? Their egos couldn't handle it. One of them, clearly the ringleader, stepped closer, his sneer widening into a smirk. "Hey, big guy," he called out, his tone dripping with mockery. "You lost? You don't look like you belong here." His cronies erupted into laughter, feeding off the tension like hyenas circling a lion they believed to be asleep. Still, the man said nothing. He finished fueling his car, replaced the nozzle, and turned to face them. For the first time, his eyes met theirs not with anger, not with fear, but with a clarity that sent a ripple through the group. There was no malice in his gaze, only a quiet authority that made them pause, if only for a fraction of a second. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying a weight that silenced the jeers momentarily. Their response was predictable. One of them, emboldened by the perceived weakness in his words, took a step forward and shoved him lightly on the shoulder. "Not looking for trouble?" The man snickered, his bravado masking the uncertainty creeping into his expression. "Maybe trouble's looking for you." The others laughed again, but this time it was forced, hollow. Something had shifted. The man didn't react to the shove. Instead, he took a deep breath, his posture relaxing even further. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge that cut through the noise like a blade. "Step back," he said, his tone measured, but laced with a warning that sent a shiver down the spine of anyone paying attention. They didn't step back. If anything, they doubled down, their bravado masking the unease now flickering in their eye. Another one lunged forward, attempting to intimidate him with sheer proximity, his chest puffed out like a peacock displaying its feathers. But the man didn't retreat. He stood his ground, his presence suddenly commanding in a way that defied logic. How could someone who seemed so unassuming moments ago now radiate such power? The insults continued, growing more aggressive, more personal. They pushed harder, their voices rising in volume, their movements becoming erratic. To them, he was still just a target, someone they could dominate, someone they could break. What they failed to realize was that every word, every shove, every laugh was chipping away at the thin veneer of restraint that held him back. And when that restraint finally gave way, it wouldn't be anger that emerged, it would be something far more dangerous. As the tension reached its breaking point, the atmosphere became suffocating. The bystanders who had been watching from a distance began to shift uncomfortably, sensing that something monumental was about to happen. Phones were pulled out, cameras discreetly activated, as if everyone knew instinctively that this moment would be etched into memory. The group of men, oblivious to the storm they were about to unleash, continued their assault, blind to the fact that they were no longer dealing with a passive observer. And then it happened. One of them crossed the line. A shove too hard, a taunt too cruel, a gesture too disrespectful. In that instant, the man straightened up, his demeanor transforming before their very eyes. The quiet, unassuming figure they had mocked was gone, replaced by someone entirely different. His posture shifted, his shoulders squared, and his eyes locked onto theirs with an intensity that froze them in place. For the first time, they hesitated. For the first time, they saw him not as a victim, but as something else entirely. The moment hung suspended in time, as if the universe itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. The man who had been so deliberately calm, so unshakably composed, now exuded an energy that was impossible to ignore. His transformation was subtle yet undeniable, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon, quiet at first, but unmistakably powerful. The group of men, still caught in their haze of arrogance, didn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation until it was too late. One of them stepped forward again, this time with more force, shoving the man harder than before. It was meant to be a display of dominance, a final flex of their perceived superiority. But instead of recoiling or showing any sign of fear, the man reacted with precision and purpose. In one fluid motion, he shifted his weight, redirecting the shove with effortless grace. The attacker stumbled backward, caught off guard by the sudden resistance. For the first time, confusion flickered across his face, quickly replaced by disbelief. Before anyone could process what had just happened, the man moved again. There was no hesitation, no wasted effort, only calculated action. When another member of the group lunged toward him, fists clenched and posture aggressive, the man sidestepped with ease, using the attacker's own momentum against him. A simple twist of his body sent the man sprawling to the ground, groaning in pain. The others froze, their bravado crumbling like sandcastles under crashing waves. It wasn't brute strength that overwhelmed them, it was something far more refined. Every movement the man made was deliberate, controlled, and efficient. Years of training as a Navy SEAL commando had honed his instincts to a razor's edge, and now those skills were on full display. He didn't lash out in anger. There was no wild flailing or reckless retaliation. Instead, he neutralized each threat with surgical precision, disarming both their physical advances and their psychological intimidation. The ringleader, realizing too late that they had underestimated their opponent, tried to rally his friends. "Get him!" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. But his words fell flat. The others were already retreating, their earlier bravado evaporating into thin air. One of them attempted to swing at the man, but the blow never landed. With a swift motion, the man caught the attacker's wrist, twisting it just enough to force him to his knees. Another tried to flee, only to find himself tripped and sprawled awkwardly on the asphalt. The scene unfolded with almost surreal clarity. What had started as a one-sided taunt had turned into a masterclass in discipline and control. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't boast, didn't revel in his dominance. Instead, he maintained the same calm demeanor he'd shown from the beginning, as if the chaos around him was merely background noise. Each movement he made was measured, each decision deliberate. It was less of a fight and more of a demonstration, a stark reminder of the difference between arrogance and true capability. As the last of the attackers scrambled to their feet or limped away, the reality of the situation sank in for everyone present. The group that had swaggered into the gas station full of bluster and bravado now looked utterly defeated. Their faces were pale, their bodies trembling with a mix of shock and humiliation. They had come looking for a victim, someone they could bully without consequence. What they found instead was a force they couldn't comprehend, let alone overcome. The bystanders, who had initially watched in stunned silence, began to stir. Some clapped quietly, while others whispered amongst themselves, their voices filled with awe and disbelief. Phones captured the aftermath, recording shaky footage of the fallen attackers and the lone figure standing tall amidst the chaos. But the man paid them no mind. He adjusted his jacket, brushed off imaginary dust from his sleeves, and took a deep breath, as if shaking off the tension of the past few minutes. Then, without a word, he leaned casually against his car, waiting. For the group of men, the lesson was painfully clear. They had misjudged him in every possible way. They saw his size, his quiet demeanor, his apparent lack of reaction, and assumed weakness. What they failed to see was the depth of his experience, the years of rigorous training, and the unshakable resolve that lay beneath the surface. And now they were paying the price for their assumption. The gas station, once a quiet and unassuming backdrop to the monotony of everyday life, now bore the scars of what had just transpired. The attackers, those who moments ago had strutted around with such unchecked arrogance, were scattered across the lot like discarded toys, their bravado shattered into pieces too small to salvage. Two of them lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in pain, their bodies curled inward as if trying to shield themselves from further humiliation. Another stumbled to his feet, clutching his ribs, his face pale and slick with sweat. The fourth, perhaps the most cowardly of the group, was already halfway to their truck, his legs pumping furiously as though fleeing for his very life. Their laughter, once so loud and obnoxious, had been replaced by labored breathing and muffled curses. The ringleader, still sitting awkwardly on the asphalt, looked up at the man with wide, disbelieving eyes. There was no defiance left in him now, only fear, a raw, primal fear that made him shrink under the weight of the man's unwavering gaze. For all their posturing, they had been reduced to nothing more than shadows of the men they thought they were. Bystanders, frozen in shock during the confrontation, began to emerge from the periphery. Some moved cautiously toward the scene, their faces etched with concern, but also curiosity. Others stayed rooted where they stood, phones held aloft as they captured shaky footage of the aftermath. Whispers rippled through the crowd, snippets of conversation carried on the night air. "Did you see that? Who is this guy? I've never seen anything like it." The man paid them no mind. He simply stood there, leaning against his car, his expression calm and unreadable, as though he were waiting for a bus rather than standing in the wake of a life-altering moment. When the distant wail of sirens pierced the night, the tension that lingered in the air seemed to dissipate slightly. Help was on the way, though it felt almost unnecessary now. The situation had already been resolved, not with chaos or violence, but with precision and control. As the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the gas station, casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement, witnesses began to step forward, eager to recount what they had seen. Their voices overlapped in a cacophony of awe and disbelief, each person trying to piece together the extraordinary events that had unfolded before their eyes. The police arrived quickly, their presence authoritative yet measured. Officers fanned out across the lot, assessing the scene with practiced efficiency. They approached the man first, their body language cautious but respectful. One officer asked for his account of what had happened, and the man responded with the same composure he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. His words were concise, factual, devoid of embellishment or emotion. He didn't paint himself as a hero, he didn't cast blame or seek validation. He simply told the truth, offering a straightforward narrative that left little room for interpretation. Meanwhile, the attackers were rounded up, their protests feeble and unconvincing. Witnesses eagerly corroborated the man's version of events, recounting the taunts, the insults, the escalating aggression, all of which had culminated in the inevitable reckoning. It was clear to everyone present, including the officers, that the man had acted not out of malice, but out of necessity. He hadn't sought trouble, but when it came knocking, he had answered with a clarity and resolve that few could match. As the authorities led the attackers away, The man remained where he was, leaning casually against his car. He didn't gloat, didn't lecture, didn't even glance in the direction of those who had tried to intimidate him. Instead, he adjusted his jacket one final time, surveyed the scene with a brief, sweeping gaze, and then turned his attention back to his vehicle. With a quiet click of the door handle, he slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb without so much as a backward glance. The gas station, once a stage for chaos and confrontation, fell silent once more. The neon sign above the pumps continued to buzz faintly, oblivious to the drama that had played out beneath its glow. The bystanders lingered for a while longer, reluctant to leave the sight of something so extraordinary. Conversations ebbed and flowed, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter or exclamations of disbelief. But eventually, they too dispersed, returning to their cars or resuming their interrupted routines. And just like that, the night returned to normalcy, as close to normalcy as it could after such an event. The man's departure was as understated as his arrival, leaving behind only the faint scent of gasoline and the lingering memory of a lesson learned. To those who had witnessed it, the encounter would be etched into their minds forever, a vivid reminder of the dangers of underestimating others based on appearances alone. As the gas station returned to its quiet hum, the weight of what had just transpired settled over the scene like a heavy fog. The neon lights flickered faintly, casting an almost surreal glow over the asphalt where moments earlier chaos had erupted. The man's car was long gone now, disappearing into the night as silently as he had arrived. But his presence lingered not in the physical sense, but in the minds of everyone who had witnessed the events unfold. It wasn't just the skill or precision with which he had neutralized the attackers that left such a profound impression. It was the quiet dignity with which he carried himself, even in the face of hostility. This wasn't merely a story about self-defense or standing up to bullies, it was a lesson etched in stark relief. Appearances can deceive. Assumptions can blind us. And arrogance, when left unchecked, often leads to downfall. Those men, loud, brash, and fueled by their own ignorance, walked into the gas station believing they were untouchable. They saw someone they thought they could dominate, someone they believed would crumble under their taunt. What they encountered instead was a force far greater than brute strength, discipline, restraint, and an unshakable sense of purpose. The Navy SEAL Commando didn't need to raise his voice or boast about his abilities. His actions spoke louder than any words ever could. In those few minutes, he demonstrated not only his training but also his character. He showed that true strength isn't about seeking conflict, it's about knowing how to handle it when it finds you. It's about choosing composure over chaos, control over recklessness, and respect over cruelty. For the witnesses, this encounter became more than just a memory, it became a mirror reflecting their own perceptions and biases. How often do we judge others based on surface-level impressions? How many times have we underestimated someone because they didn't fit our preconceived notions of power or capability? This story served as a reminder that beneath every unassuming exterior lies a depth we may never fully understand. And sometimes, the most extraordinary individuals are the ones who choose silence over spectacle until the moment demands otherwise. As the sirens faded into the distance and the last bystanders drove away, the gas station stood as a silent testament to the unpredictability of life. Moments like these remind us that heroes don't always wear composure uniform. Sometimes they're just ordinary people going about their day, carrying within them the extraordinary ability to rise above adversity with grace and resolve. So, here's something to think about. Have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances? Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end of someone else's assumptions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Stories like these spark important conversations, and your voice matters. Before you go, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more powerful stories like this one. If you found this tale gripping, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who appreciates real-life drama. And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community. Until next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and remember, the world is full of unexpected twists, and the most remarkable stories often come from the most unlikely places.